Hello, I'd like to welcome you all to a presentation of the National Arts Club Architecture Committee. While we can't wait to get back to our in-person programs, whenever that is safe and appropriate, we've been producing continuous programming since the beginning of the pandemic. Our viewership has exploded, and the NAC is so pleased to be able to bring 4 or 5 quality arts programs a week to all kinds to our members, our guests, and an ever larger new audience. Throughout the year, we offer architecture programs monthly on a great many aspects of architecture. Be sure to look for our upcoming programs. Also, our past programs are able to be found on YouTube, so look them up at any time and enjoy them at your leisure. We'll be taking questions for our speakers, so use your chat button to submit them. After the talk, we'll get to as many as we can. And now for our program, Building Race and History, Inspiring Architects in Conversation. Today, we will welcome Susanna Sarafman, the founder and president of Dovetail Design Strategies, the leading independent architect selection firm in the States, as she talks with prominent contemporary architects, Deryl McKissack, president and CEO of McKissack & McKissack, and Mark Gardner, principal, Jacklich Gardner Architects. We'll celebrate the recent work of these industry leaders, including the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., Marc Jacobs stores around the globe, and the Asali Nyuki Beekeeper Sanctuary in Tanzania. We'll learn about the important historical influences on their careers and projects, and hear their hopes for a more equitable future. We look forward to the time when we can resume gathering in person. But although this program is online, we feel that you are here with us at the National Arts Club. And now, please welcome Susanna Sarafman.
Thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Steve, Deryl, and Mark, and all of you who are joining us. And a big thank you to the National Arts Club and the National Arts Club Architecture Committee for hosting this discussion. I thought today I would start by telling you a bit about Deryl McKissack, who will then tell us more about her very impressive firm, her own inspiring personal history, and her concrete plan as to how we can achieve a more equitable future. Following Deryl's presentation, I will introduce Mark Gardner, who will then share his important work as architect, scholar, and leader in the University of Pennsylvania's new initiative to preserve African American civil rights heritage sites. We will follow this with a Q&A, as Steve said. Please send through your questions via the chat. I'm thrilled to be speaking with these two impressive leaders of my industry, the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. I founded my own company, Dovetail Design Strategists, which matches clients and architects for high-profile complex projects on the premise that design excellence really matters. I see design excellence as an essential element for quality of life, and advocating for design excellence in the public realm has been the focus of my own career. Every aspect of our built physical surroundings is designed. Cities, infrastructure, parks, transportation systems, housing, even signage. Where we live, play, work, and worship is designed and built by someone, for someone, with intent. The best projects are those where all voices are represented throughout the design and building process. It is vital in the creation of design excellence that there be racial equity in the fields of architecture, engineering, and construction. Deryl McKissack, as chairwoman and CEO of McKissack & McKissack, an architectural, engineering, program, and construction firm managing $15 billion in projects nationwide, has led the charge for racial equity within the AEC industry for almost 4 decades. Deryl is a licensed professional civil engineer who double majored in architecture and engineering at Howard University. Deryl is the 5th generation of her family to work in the design and construction field. Her company, McKissack & McKissack, is the outgrowth of the nation's oldest African-American architectural firm, which predates the Civil War, and traces its beginnings to Moses McKissack, a master builder who is also an enslaved person. During the past 30 years under her leadership, McKissack & McKissack has designed, managed, and had leadership roles on an incredible roster of landmark projects. The firm and Deryl have received a long list of awards, the latest being announced just this week. McKissack & McKissack was named a 2020 Inc. magazine Best in Business honoree for the firm's superlative impact on their industries, in their communities, the environment, and society as a whole. I now turn it over to Deryl.
Susanna, thank you so much for that great introduction. Is there anything else for me to say? But I'm going to jump right into it because I'm so excited about getting into our conversation today. I feel like the three of us have so much synergy in the different things that we do. And I want to first thank the National Arts Club for including me today. So Natalie, can we go to the presentation? Okay. So again, it's our pleasure to be here today. I'm just gonna tell you about our quick journey and some of the major projects that we have completed as a company, or projects that we still may be working on. Next, please. First of all, we are also now a national company. Even though we started in Washington, D.C. 30 years ago, we've expanded to Chicago, Los Angeles, Austin, Texas, and Dallas, Texas, and LA. We manage around $15 billion a year, of construction, and we're listed in ENR's listing of top PM firms in the country and top 100 CM firm in the country. And yes, my family goes back to 1790, when my great-great-grandfather came to this country as a slave. He was a builder as a slave, and he passed the trade of building down to my great-grandfather, who became a master carpenter. He passed his trade down to my grandfather and my great-uncle, and they started our family business in Tennessee in 1905, making us the oldest African-American architectural firm in the country. They designed and built a lot of historically Black colleges and universities, but what really put them on the map was a Tuskegee Air Force Base that they designed and built during World War II. And then I came, well, that business was passed to my father, and of course he ran it. And then he had 3 girls. And he said, what am I gonna do with these girls? But we went to school for both architecture and engineering. And I came out and worked for some of the larger companies in the country and decided to start my own business in 1990. Next, please. We offer 3 core services in our company. The first one being architecture interiors, and it's full service architecture interiors, whether it's for public clients or private clients. Next slide. And we offer a full slate of program management and construction management services. And lastly, we have our infrastructure group that really manages water, wastewater, roads, bridges, aviation, and those kinds of projects. Next slide. I'm going to start with some of the major projects in our architecture group. Next slide. We have the most visibility because of the types of iconic landmarks that we have worked on. And it started probably about 15 years ago, when on the left, you see that we did the upgrades to the Lincoln and Jefferson memorials. And from there, we moved to design the Martin Luther King Memorial. We were the lead design builders on that project on the right. Next, please. And also to the left is the bookstore. And as you know, we are about to have an inauguration, and we have been designing the reviewing stands for the president, the mayor, and the press for the inaugurations for the last 3 inaugurations, and we're doing it right now. If you turn the page, we have a picture of it under construction. Next. And there they are going up in front of the White House. We've been really honored to get a call from the Bush Foundation a couple of years ago. And they asked us to design some additions to George Bush's library in College Station, Texas. If you can go to the next slide, please. He is going to receive a Marine One helicopter, And so we designed on the left a facility to house that helicopter, as well as provide space for gatherings. And then he's also slated to receive an Air Force One. So on the right hand, you'll see another pavilion or structure that we designed to house the Air Force One. Next. And lastly, when he passed, his body was carried on a train from Houston to College Station. And that engine was provided by CSX. And they have donated that engine to the foundation. And so we have designed this outdoor pavilion to house that engine. On the right-hand side, you'll see that this is the soccer stadium that we designed here in Washington, D.C. We've done a lot of different concepts, really quick concepts for private clients, and of course for the mayors in the cities that we've worked in, and this happens to be one. We can go to next. And I'm going to start moving quick. We've done some economic development projects that have been concepts for our mayor here. Sports and entertainment is the right, and that's the Wizards facility. On the far right, we've even been working for Exelon, who is a huge utility company, and they've wanted housing for the substations that they're putting in urban areas. And so we've been designing those substations for them. Next, please. And I'm just going to go to next so we can keep it moving. I'm going to talk a little bit now about our program and construction management group. We were the program managers for the African American Museum on the National Mall, which of course, got world acclaim because it was a piece of the puzzle that was missing on our National Mall, because it tells American history in the eyes of African Americans. And to the right, you'll see some of the construction site, which it was a very fragile site because the Washington Monument was nearby. And we have the Tigris River that runs through the site. And so making sure that the water level stayed constant to not move any of the structures near in the surrounding areas was very key. Next, please. Here's the Obama Presidential Center. See, we're equal opportunity. We work on both sides of the aisles. Can we do that today still? But we are very proud to be the project managers for his new presidential library. On the right is MGM's casino and resort that was built here in the DC area, a $1.4 billion project, 250 key hotel, and a huge casino and parking garage. And it was speed to market, very luxury. It's the most luxurious building outside of Las Vegas for them. And in Chicago, we've worked on a lot of different projects for McPier, but this is the new Marriott Marquis that we provided construction management work. And the Wintrust Arena was a part of this project as well. To the right, we were the project managers for the Nationals baseball stadium. And that was the fastest built stadium in its time. 18 months, we delivered that project. Next. And this is Navy Pier, which many people on this phone have probably visited at one time or another. And we've been the construction managers to revitalize Navy Pier. We can keep going. The right is again, McCormick and adding hotels at McCormick in Chicago. We've worked on a lot of universities, and K through 12 is one of our strong points, but this on the left is a whole new college for Malcolm X College that we were construction managers for. On the right, we've worked for a lot of developers in many cities. This happens to be City Center in DC, which was a huge economic driver for downtown. Next, please. And there we are. Hopefully I'm close to my 10 minutes, Susanna.
Perfect, perfect. So thank you, Deryl, for that wonderful presentation. You bring such a rich historical perspective to the table, and what an extraordinary company you lead. You're a powerful inspiration for all of us, entrepreneurs and business owners. So now we'll turn to the architect, Mark Gardner, a principal at New York City-based architecture firm, Gardner, has devoted his practice to the nexus of architecture and art and design initiatives that are socially beneficial. Gardner's work covers all scales from product and furniture design to very contemporary ground-up buildings around the world. Like Deryl, Mark's firm has also won many awards. Gardner are included in numerous industry listings of top design firms, too many to recite in the time allotted here, but the latest accolade is the firm being named one of the Architects Newspaper's 2020 annual Top 50 Best Architecture Firms. Mark is the director of the Masters of Architecture program and an assistant professor of architecture and practice at the Parsons School of Design, and writing, teaching, and research has been a mainstay of his career. A past president and currently the advocacy chair for the New York chapter of the National Organization of Minority Architects, Mark sits on the boards of multiple institutions, including Superfront and the New York Coalition of Black Architects. Mark holds a Master's of Architecture from the University of Pennsylvania Stuart Weitzman School of Design, where he now serves on their board of overseers. In this role, Mark is heavily involved with Penn's new initiative, the Center for the Preservation of Civil Rights Sites, which is devoted to the preservation of built environments that reflect and symbolize the civil rights movement in the US, a mandate that will enhance the visibility of Black heritage on a national scale. So I now turn it over to Mark.
Susanna, thank you so much. And thank you again to the National Arts Club for this invitation to speak today. Let me just share my screen. Okay. So today I'll try to run through this quickly. I'll be speaking about the work of my firm, Gardner Architects, with my partners, business partner, Stefan Jacklich, as well as work that I've done in academia with Parsons and our students. I work with our design workshop, teaching students about the built environment in their design studio. So they go out, we work with a nonprofit, they go out and build the projects as well. So I sort of entitle this talk a little bit as Some Stories, really taken from this Chimamanda Adichie quote, "The single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story." In some ways, so our work has been with Gardner has been known for its retail work. This is our Tori Ishiku building, which was done with a developer, Hong Kong-based developer, and Mark Jacobs in Tokyo, Japan. There's the dense urban fabric of Tokyo. It straddles the area between a heavily commercial district and a residential zone. It's right at the line. As you can see in the photo, there's some residential buildings in the foreground. So this building is really about sort of a material culture, about the sort of making, how you start to design within another culture. We wanted to be respectful of the place that we were designing. We always try to do that. And so in our planning, we had to go through and understand the zoning. Like I said, we're between a commercial residential zone, and understanding our footprint. We had only a two-story building, and then the area above, which is the Casa Kabutsu, is really just sort of for zoning, but we put our mechanicals up there. So it actually became becomes our really signage and footprint for the building. So there it is. Our design sort of tried to incorporate how to best express the materiality of the building. We started off by looking at our sections and what we could do. We occupy the 2 floors in a basement, and then there's a sub level that has cisterns for meeting the sustainability standards for Tokyo. This was the ultimate design that we came up with. We looked at things culturally within the place, being in Tokyo, the history of craft and making. This was a custom ceramics piece that we actually made for the building, We worked with the manufacturer, with Inax, to actually make this piece. We actually had to then also design the holders for it, the clips that put it in place that could withstand earthquake, being in an earthquake zone. So there you see it, the mock-up of that wall, the built sort of material culture. So we got, by having this break line of this piece, we actually ended up with 2 pieces, which gave us sort of a mass customization of this one piece, which allowed for variation, sort of, very varied facade. The top, the Kosakabutsu that I was talking about, we actually looked at not just making it the covering for the mechanicals, but actually being a light monitor, expressive signage for the building. Looking at, say, lantern, the idea of lanterns, plaster work, hemp plaster in this case, in old Japanese temples, the idea of sort of the goldfish or koi, scales. We started looking at how we could best express that skin, wrapping it around the top of the building and illuminating it. We actually figured this out with local manufacturer. Move this along. And worked out this screen. There it is, sort of on site. That's the perforations to actually sort of give a sense of this billowing of the screen. And there it is, installed in the final building. One of the other projects that I'll talk about quickly is one that's about land conservation. This was in Tanzania. We actually did a design for a bee sanctuary. And when I say bee sanctuary, it's not for the honeybees. It's actually for the beekeepers themselves. So it's actually a training center. It's a marketplace to the global marketplace for a cooperative of around 15,000 beekeepers. And so our clients, Mary Canning with Follow the Honey, David Kamara, her business partner working with her, they were teaching sustainable beekeeping to local groups, to tribal groups, as well as local villages. They also had a bee safari, Yuki being the bee, in Swahili. So going around sort of meeting with all of these beekeepers. It was a very interesting project. It's been one that's still ongoing. We learned from the bee in that we were trying to create a building that could expand over time as the enterprise expands, as they grow, so that they could build it in phases in order to best accommodate sort of a really growing number of beekeepers within the cooperative, bringing them there for training, as I mentioned before, and also have this marketplace as well as the launch point for the bee safari. That's a sort of frontal view. The building was made to sort of feel like it came out of the ground. You'll see the bricks match the ground because they're made from the local soil. And so we really want the building to feel like it was really anchored in this place. And this was in Dodoma, outside of Dodoma, Tanzania. There's some more views. And of course, we did studies just looking at, the solar, how these spaces would be illuminated, how to best take advantage of natural light, the screening to provide shading during the day. We're in a sort of semi-arid microclimate there, so we really wanted to be sure that we had good shading. That's also why we have the the sort of informal spaces of the courtyards as well for people to be able to meet and talk. Then also moving on to my work at Parsons, I run our design workshop. The last few years, we've really been involved with some projects that deal with working with nonprofits, and we've now taken on really sort of a focus around food justice, which is something that's interesting to me and feel like it's a problem that we really need to be looking at because it's really so connected to so many health, environmental justice, racism. It's just, there's so many issues all tied together through that. And so our students have been working with local groups. In this case, this is our group from this past spring. We didn't, unfortunately, because of COVID, get to build the project, but we actually created a pavilion with the Oko Farms, our client there in Weeksville. This is sorry, I'll get back to that, but this is another project that we did with the Trust for Governor's Island, which was, and for their nonprofits out there, Grow NYC, Billion Oyster Project, Earth Matters Composting, to provide an outdoor and indoor, which I'll show in a minute, classroom space. And so the students designed this pavilion. There's the indoor space. It'll, at some point in the future, it'll get solar panels on the roof. And you can see downtown Manhattan in the distance from Governor's Island. There's the finished pavilion. The students designed everything down to the stools and the seating. Really was a fantastic job by that group. I was very proud of them, what they were able to sort of put together. So in that studio, they actually design in the spring and then work over the summer. And there are a lot of people to really, too many to sort of think, but I co-instruct this course with Dr. Sharon Sutton, who teaches the students about really how to collaborate and how to work with the client. Our dean, Robert Kirkbride, Joel Storr, who's on the faculty, who does product design, and Mike Verbos. And then we've had other co-instructors, Nick Brennan and Thomas Cosbow. So all who helped, sort of a lot of hands went into sort of helping the students make this project. This was our project from this past spring. This was our at Weeksville. If you don't know, Weeksville is a historic site in Brooklyn that's actually was a village of free Blacks that were landowners in the 1830s. These buildings date from the 19th century. They've been preserved by Weeksville Society and maintained by the city of New York. And the students actually worked on an aquaponics farm out there with Oko Farms. And this was the pavilion that they designed. I have these two images. This is still in planning. And like I said, because of COVID, we were actually slowed up, but it actually tries to capture the sort of idea. It was called porch light, really sort of capturing the idea of the porch as a central feature of some of the houses and within African-American culture. But also the newspaper that was published out in Weeksville was called Torchlight. So that was the students sort of play off of that. So hopefully this project, it's still, ongoing. The students completed all the drawings and hopefully this will happen in the coming year. And then a couple of quick images I'll show, and this is the last thing I'll mention. I'm trying to sort of connect the dots of things that have been of interest to me and how I've sort of tried to direct my career. Susanna mentioned I'm working with the University of Pennsylvania. I serve on the board of advisors, and I've been working with the Historic Preservation Program on the new Center for the Preservation of Civil Rights Sites. In this case, I'm showing Nina Simone's birthplace, house in Tryon, North Carolina, Tuskegee University, from images from the National Archives, where the program is actually run by Randy Mason, a professor in historic preservation at the University of Pennsylvania, is actually we're working with Tuskegee to look at the buildings originally built on the campus by formerly enslaved people. And how to restore those. But when I say it's the Center for the Preservation of Civil Rights Sites, some might say we're talking about more than the sort of 1954 to 1968, or however you might quantify that period of the civil rights era. We might be talking about even more than that, like Reconstruction, right, as civil rights, right? Times of enslavement are about civil rights. So, the Dred Scott decision. So we're looking at sites that, have a part of our African-American history, and how we can best serve to preserve and give focus to those sites. Randy has brought on Brent Leggs, who's with National Trust, and Monica Rhodes, who's with the National Park Service for advisement. So I'm really excited to see where this goes, and really excited to be involved with it. So with that, I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Mark, for that beautiful presentation. Wow, both of you have so much going on and so much important work. And Mark, it's great to hear about your design thinking at all scales and how the many different aspects of your career, designing, building, teaching, they're all really based on all the same driving principles. I have so many questions for both of you. I'm going to start with Deryl. So Deryl, your team designed and built the presidential inaugural viewing stands for Obama, for Trump, and now you're doing the same for our president-elect Joe Biden. I thought maybe you could speak a little bit to what role, if any, you think politics should play in business.
Every project I'm in is political. So I feel like there is politics in all business. Now, whether or not the administration makes a difference in that depends on your business. Because I know that in terms of construction, our projects, many of our projects have a long time frame in which they're working under. So it really doesn't matter who's in the administration or who's the president is, because those projects were already put into motion before, right? And maybe that new administration can impact the new projects that are coming out. But it just depends on your business. But in our business, I would say it's less impactful.
Right. Fascinating. Mark, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I find that every to Daryl's point, everything ends up being political, I think. And so a lot of times you find yourself having to negotiate with people that don't always agree with you. But if you can find a common purpose, you point your arrow toward that, and that's where you start the work. Right. It's like, I think of some of the civil rights sites and all of that. You won't win everyone over, but you have to start somewhere.
Right. I always think of architecture as long-term relationships. It's sort of on elephant time, from when the team is selected to when the project is built. So it's quite interesting, Deryl, that you say it could go for many different, at least two different administrations of project. So Mark, your project programs and locations are often very, very different. For instance, the Marc Jacobs shops, they're very luxe, high-end retail compared to the Beekeepers Sanctuary in Africa, which has completely different aspirations. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what you find most similar about designing these projects and what you find most different.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. One of the things that Stefan, my business partner, and I always sort of talk about is that work that we did for Marc Jacobs. We're very proud of. It was, it was actually helping them try to build their brand identity. And so sometimes what was unique about it was they were global. So the lesson that we sort of learned from that was we had to keep something about it that really spoke to the brand, but also they wanted to be local. Right. So here you are, global, local, and you're trying to make those things not come into conflict. And so you're designing to a place and trying to capture some, the Japan building, Tokyo building is an example of that. You're trying to capture something that's about the quality or culture of the place, which is very difficult. You don't want to be overly nostalgic. You don't want to be too camp. You don't want to be too, you want to be respectful in a way is and this would be true of any architect working in any place. You want to be respectful of the community that you're working in. And so our respect was to the craft and making that's inherent in Japanese culture, and try to really express that. So, hopefully we sort of did that, but, I think the difference in the work ends up being that, well, what they share, the same thing, that same craft and level of understanding of material and material culture and making within a community is also true of Tanzania, where, we have, very little budget, not highly trained labor to actually make the project. And so how can we actually help them, create something that, as the client put it, I really want to create a place of dignity that dignifies the labor of the people that do the work.
Right.
And so the building should express that. And that's like when you have a client like that, and the same, I'll relate that also back to Marjay's. When you have a client like that understands the power of what architecture can provide for them, you're already there. You've got so much to work with. No great buildings, no good buildings without good clients or great clients.
Deryl, too, it sounds like it looks like you have some fabulous clients also. Do you find it different building, you do work all over the States. Do you find it different working in different places?
Oh, absolutely. I think every city has its personality, and people respond to you differently. People have a different way of doing business. I find, as you go west, the Midwest is probably a little more relaxed than the East, and allow you to slip into a meeting
You think?
Then by the time you get west, they may not show up to the meeting. But I just think, and everybody though has a choice of whether or not they're going to be sensitive to the end user and the fabric of the location of where they're going. And I just have to applaud Mark on his projects. I just love the way that he was so sensitive to the area, to the people. And that goes to kind of the subject that we want to talk about today. So I'll leave it at that, Susanna.
Yeah, well, it's a nice segue, because I was going to say, as we all agree, architects, engineers, and urban planners really must reflect the diversity within our country. So I know that you have a 7-step plan, Deryl, but what action, not just sending out a message that we stand with you, but what action should any size AEC firm do right now, implement today, to move things forward in terms of racial equity?
Well, first of all, I think we have to realize that we spend $1.3 trillion a year in construction. We employ over 1 million people. We are in every area of our life, whether it's educational, or we're transporting people, or, it's where you go to work every day. It's where the hospitals, you name it, we're in it. So if any industry can have transformational change, it's our industry.
Yeah.
But we are way behind. Okay, they're way behind, and we've been that way in almost everything. Just think about how long it's taken us to move things forward. The same is true with racism and sexism. And it starts with first saying, number one, we have a problem. We need to admit we have a problem. Then we need to say, yes, we're going to do something about this problem. Now that takes, different steps, because the whole purpose of my plan is decreasing the financial gap that exists between white America and minority America, and between men and women. And also, how do we give minorities and women an equal seat at the table? I had the great opportunity to go out to the Apple headquarters, the Ring in Cupertino. And at lunchtime, when everybody was going to lunch, I had the opportunity to see them. You know, we have this vision of what we think would be at Apple. Well, that's not true. It's everybody, every age, every gender, every race and ethnicity group that you can imagine. And so, you know, but for me, it was a confirmation of what we do at McKissack, which is we celebrate diversity, because we know that hearing from all types of perspectives, and not just how you were born, whether you were Black, white, female, male, whatever, your whole perspective is unique, okay? Unique to everybody. How you were trained, of what you went to school for, you know, how you were raised, what values were you raised with. All of those things make a difference when you're trying to come up with the best solution to a problem, or if you're trying to create something innovative. And so when I look at Apple, and they are, to me, the Tiffany's of the FANG group, I understand why. And I understand why all of their products are coveted. People are standing in line to get it because they're hearing from people around the globe. They're hearing from everybody.
So beautifully said, Deryl. I mean, it really is true. Our industry is shockingly behind. Yet our industry is designing buildings for everybody. So it doesn't make any sense. But Mark, did you want to chime in?
Sure. I mean, I think a major part. It's interesting because I was just talking to someone and saying, like, who's an older architect, and it was like, we were talking about the number of African-American architects being, around 2% of all registered architects. And it was like, oh, because I have the same number from 1970, whatever. And I'm like, it hasn't changed. The dial hasn't really moved. And so that part is really sort of discouraging. But you still, like, I think each of us still try to take on what we individually can do, but we see that is probably not going to be enough, that we actually have to make a larger demand of our industries, of our organizations, to try to diversify, not just diversify, but actually try to go in and work with kids and make them aware of that this profession, this career is available to you. And I think it's just part of the problem is, like, a lot of kids don't, they don't really realize, oh, what's an architect, or I don't know what, I give props to, NOMA's had, Project Pipeline, really trying to, make kids aware of it. Michael Ford, who's done hip hop architecture camp, we sort of tout that, where it's like trying to get kids interested, understand that, so much of their lives is spent in their built environments, and that they can actually have a hand in shaping those. It's the thought becomes like that someone else is kind of doing, or someone who knows better is doing that. No one knows better than you how you want to live in your environment, in your community. And so it's like, really trying to go out and, like I said, we're each trying to do our part, but I think it's like now we have to also advocate with these larger organizations and the industry to try to bring about change.
Yeah. Did you in particular, I know, Deryl, you grew up around architecture. But Mark, what did you have a particular mentor, or how did you get interested in the field?
Well, it was funny because I used to, I did like, I grew up in sort of the typical way. I didn't really know any architects, even though I was interested in history and preservation. It's funny, I've come back around to that. I grew up in Williamsburg, Virginia. So, history and, all of that. And so that was my sort of first exposure. But it's funny because I look at in school, like I got what might be a typical story is like STEM, not STEAM, STEM. And it's like, oh, you should go into engineering. And, you know, it's funny because I went to a camp where it was like a NASA camp and there were engineers and you're doing material forensics and stuff. And I was like, hey, this glass, like when we drop the ball, that could, like, if you put that in like a hurricane zone, it's like the glass wouldn't break. And you know, and they're like, oh, yeah, I guess architect would kind of deal with that or whatever. I was like, oh, and then this material would be great. It's like you could put roofing or make it a house or make a house out of it. And they're like, kid, I think you want to be an architect and maybe you're in the wrong place, kind of thing. And, you know, so I you know, I'm always sort of been just, you know, I think I knew in high school that I really wanted to be an architect. And it's been an uphill climb. It's been tough in a lot of ways at different points in my career. But I'd say, you know, it wasn't until I got to college that I finally met a Black architect, much less, you know, met architects, but meeting a Black architect, it was, you know, I'm in college at that point. And so that was my sort of first exposure. And then after college, I worked for Bill and Ivenu, you know, Stanley, and Ivenu loved Stanley. And that was really formative for me in a lot of ways.
And Deryl, along the same line, what sort of advice would you have for students of color who are studying architecture to sort of support them all the way, not just through school, but through licensing and beyond? Do you have any suggestions, engineers, architects?
Yes, but I wanted to go back and just add to your last question about what can firms do and loop it back around what Mark said. Because really, you know, we need, after we say, yes, there's racism, we need to change policies. And I can talk a little bit about that, but I'd like to go further to, we need to hire and promote minorities and women, and we need to put them at the board level. When you talk about what Mark was saying about people not having role models and people not knowing what it means to be an architect, we need to reach out to them. We need to go talk to them. But when they come into our environment, they need to feel like they're part of it. I, as a young engineer, when I started out in my first job, I was told, work hard and keep my head down. And my boss had a life-size Confederate flag behind his desk. And he talked about the Black laborers every day. And he told me how lazy they were because they took naps on their breaks. But I knew that they were in school at night, so they slept on their break. So, you know, I did not feel comfortable in my situation. I did not feel like for decades that I had a seat at the table. That's why I started my own company. And so majority companies need to do this. And McKinsey has done studies since 2015 talking about how it increases your bottom line. And why is that? Because the world wants to see diversity and inclusion. Your clients are diverse. Now the NASDAQ has even said, if you want to be on the NASDAQ, you have to have a female or a minority or LGBTQ on your board. Okay, so it's business sense. And not only that, you get a higher performance, and this is proven, and a happier work base, a healthier work base when you have inclusion. So, you know, that is, my question is, what is the problem?
What's going on here?
I could not agree more. I think the numbers for women in architecture are pretty sobering also. I think it's 17% of licensed architects are women, which
for women it's 0.04.
Yeah,
it's
unacceptable. Yeah. I think I better move to. We have a couple of questions here from the audience. So what is the relationship? This is a question from this. What is the relationship between academia and AEC firms in order to help increase diversity? What can be done before architecture school, high school career, for example? Whoever wants to jump in.
Yeah, I could jump in on that. You know, it's interesting because one of the things, talking with sort of different groups, you know, Darren Walker at the Ford Foundation has said, like, look, you got to capture kids by third grade. By that saying, meaning by the time they get later on, if we're talking high school, you've missed it. If we're talking college, you've really missed it. And, forget grad school. You have to you have to nurture the dream for kids, because so much of it, especially for minority, for BIPOC kids, those dreams get crushed early. Where you're sort of told like, oh, either we don't do that, or I don't see anybody like that. Why do you want to do that? That seems odd, or, for any number of reasons. So it's like you have to catch them early and make them aware to see people who are doing these things and realizing that they too, if they have an interest in it, that it's available to them. And so a lot of times when people, I'm not going to sit here and diss on any sort of high school program. That's great, but let's try to all start thinking earlier and nurturing kids and be in support of what their dreams could be.
Yeah. Deryl, did you want to say?
So there are a lot of great organizations, I believe, that are starting with children at a very young age. I'm on the board of Living Classrooms, and they use building ships to get children involved in the STEM. We have ACE mentoring program, which is huge in the AEC industry, where you adopt schools and you try to get kids interested in STEM. Again, what Mark said earlier, he didn't see his first architect until later in life. They need to see this. They need to see that it's a real career, and it's very fulfilling. So as much as we can get out there and be seen, I think that helps a lot.
I think that's absolutely right. In light of that, another question, what are your thoughts on architects and engineers doing pro bono work? Is that really another way of continuing systemic racism because it's preventing smaller firms, or you think that's something that is not a bad thing?
Well, in my business, it's not a bad thing. We do pro bono work. Where I would see the exclusion is that we're not invited to even do that. Okay, so that's the problem because we don't have that previous relationship to even do the pro bono work.
Wow.
Because people go back to the same people they've always worked with.
Yes.
And you know what? I'm sick and tired of seeing it in some of my cities. I see the same architectural design on multiple buildings. And I asked the developer, how many times are you going to build the same building? And I'll ask the mayor,
are you
tired of seeing that building in your city everywhere you go?
Yeah.
That's because it's a monolithic thought. It's not and it's done in a vacuum. It's not including other people.
Yeah, I think pro bono work is great when it does what it does best, which is in the end help people. And I think it also, when it's done, and I'll use it at the moment we're in, where a lot of firms did the whole like, oh look, I'm blacking out my Instagram. I'm gonna go in and help the Black community. I'm gonna make a, how you could help. I'm gonna speak to you right now. I'm speaking to you right now. You know how you can help the Black community? Go and actually find Black architects and hire them to work in your firms as you go about doing that work. Go nurture young people who are studying in the AEC industry and provide scholarships. Those are important ways to kind of help. It just to say like, oh, we're going in and we're going to help this community center do that. That's great. That's fine. But like, if you really want to, teach a man to fish, right? Like share what your knowledge, share what you know, help people grow, and then that will be that is a good purpose for pro bono work.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. I think we have time for one more question, and it's actually a bit more lighter. Somebody wants to know if the individual presidents, Deryl, have any input or suggestions for the viewing platforms.
Absolutely not. The last time we had it all in pink and we had to spray paint it in orange at the last minute. I'm just kidding. But no, they have no input.
No, no input at all. No input. Well, I think, this has been fabulous, and what a great discussion. I think we're probably out of time, and thank you so much, all of you, Deryl, Mark, Steve. It's been a fantastic conversation, and I really hope that those of you who have been listening are energized and inspired, and will continue this dialogue on your own and take actions that Deryl and Mark have very clearly spelled out for us what needs to get done. I'm going to turn it over to Steve now, and once again, I thank the National Arts Club Architecture Committee and the National Arts Club for hosting this event, and thank you all for attending.
Thanks, Susanna. Before I just say thank you and goodbye, I actually have a closing question for Deryl and Mark, and it's this. Deryl, you told us that your family has a long history in this business, but really, you, Mark, and you, Deryl, are making history right now. How does that feel to you personally, to be part of that history?
Well, I mean, for me, I want to be an impact. I want to be a positive impact to my community. And so that's not just minorities, but that's all people, because I feel right now where we are, we're at a crossroads. We could either live divided or we can try to come together. To me, 2020 was about getting 2020 vision. And that means removing the scales. That's why we went through a pandemic. We went through all these terrible things so that we could remove the scales to see where we really are. You can't sit on the sidelines right now without having a real opinion or where you are. And we have a lot of division. So I hope what history says about me is that I'm a bridge, because bridges span over obstacles to bring people together. And I think that's what we all should be doing at this point.
Amen to what Deryl just said. Totally. We really have to bridge. We have to all sort of come together. We have to realize we're all living through history right now. We all are. It's quite a moment that we'll hopefully look back on in 2020. Oh, boy, right? But as we live through this history, we're all doing it together. And we've been shown, we've been given something. We've been shown where the cracks are. We've been shown where where things are broken. So, why wouldn't we try to fix it? That's we've been given an opportunity.
Okay, well, thank you, Mark Gardner. Thank you, Deryl McKissack, and thank you, Susanna Sarafman, for a wonderful, thought-provoking program on buildings, race, and history. I thank you on behalf of the governors of the National Arts Club, and I invite all of our viewers to look for our other programs. By the way, we this fall, this September, October, November, and December, we did thematic programming across all of our 15 arts programs committees about inclusion and diversity. And we're looking to shine a light on that and highlight it. And we thank you for your contributions today. See you next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.